This is a Model QA, Triumph Model QA, 1926. It was the show model at Olympia in 1926. And a gentleman from Bath called Mr. Kerr, he bought it in 1926. He served in the 1418 war, lost an eye, so he was a one-eyed motorcyclist. And he finished motorcycling in 1939, and he put the bike in a ditch up his back garden, put his riding coat over it, put a sheet of tin over it, and it stayed there, although it had been moved in a few times because people had heard it was there and wanted to buy it. But anyhow, he wasn't selling, and in 61 I visited him to have a look at it, not to buy it, just to have a look at it. But I rode my 25 AJS over, which I had not long restored, and we had a long chat. He said, well, I told you, Michael, it's not for sale. And I said, that's okay, I just had a look at it and that's okay. So 2 hours later we got down to the gate and he said, good Lord, you come on a 25 AJ? I said, yes I did. He said, well, if you can do it up like the 25 AJ, you can have it for £1 10 shillings. And I'll go in and get the speedometer and the headlight. You can see the headlight on it now. Speedometer is going to go on a Francis Barnett. So that's the history of the bike. Mr. Kerr lived at Grigola, a bungalow on the Bath to Warminster Road. You're quite a way out of Bath, 2 miles I suppose. Some bungalows on the right hand side, and on the opposite side of the road is a hotel, a motoring hotel thing. But that's where he used to live. And he had a peach tree in the garden. Every year gave him 200 peaches. Simply beautiful. And they only knew that by counting the stones. That's the one that they didn't eat. Right, now let's get back to the bike. It's a Model QA, and the Model QA is the Sports Model P. They made the ordinary Model P as a cheap bike. This had a tuned engine, and on the clutch primary case, that was nickel plated because it was a show model. As you can see, as you will see, the footrest is nickel plated. I didn't do that, that's the original nickel plating. So it was tarted up for a show model. Mr. Kerr bought it and had it back to Bath, and they used it to 39. So it's a 550cc, a sports model of the Model P, and this is a tuned engine to give it a little bit more speed. Quite nice bike to ride. Rode it in the 40th anniversary of the Vintage Motorcycle Club up in Surrey. Haven't rode it much since, in fact I've only rode it twice since. This is the original number, FB5780, and if you checked on the registration in the Somerset area, which Bath come under at the time, you would find that that was 1926. It's got a 26-inch by 3-inch tyre, beaded edge. Now, as I've said to you before, that beaded edge tyres have to be kept at a high pressure, and I mean 40 pounds and over. Do not run them at 25 pounds. They can cause you a problem by coming off the rim. So there we are. The front wheel, 6-inch internal expanding brake. In 1925, on the Model P, they had a brake that was with a piece of cloth round it, and you just pulled on the lever and hoped it would work. This is a far better brake. Mind, this has been used for sidecar use, but that's a standard fitment. So coming back through, the magneto in the front, just the right place to catch all the mud of the day. It was a few years later when Triumphs put the magneto to the back. So the magneto's in the front. Quite often, in fact on the AJS's, they always had a protecting cover. So there's the magneto, no protecting cover, but on AJS's they did. So that was there just to catch all the muck of the day. So that helped the sparks a lot. Okay, let's have a look at the engine. 550cc, single cylinder, side valve. Not overhead valve. They made an overhead valve at this time, but this is the side valve motor. Here's the brake pedal. Footrest, brake pedal. So your foot's on your rest and there's your foot brake. This is part of the gear change mechanism. It's 3-speed, operated from a lever on the other side of the tank. 1 for up, 2 in the middle, and top is down. And this is the adjustment onto the gearbox. Toolbox. Nice useful bit of kit. Having said that, always had a toolbox on everything. Quite often they were on this carrier, but on the Triumph it filled that gap up. That's where they put the toolbox, right? A nice leather pattern saddle of the day, and as I said on the introduction, this was a bought-in saddle, sprung saddle with like rubber strips underneath it. Lovely sprung saddle. As I said, Mr. Kerr had one eye. He certainly wanted a comfortable saddle. Here, the brake is rim. By putting on the foot brake, it pushes a big block of rubber into this rim. They kept this like this because they weren't sure that if they went back to belt drive, they could have had the belt drive off of there and straight onto the rim, because the rim and the brake, the drive and the brake was always on the same rim. So they weren't sure at this time. They had a chain drive over here, but they thought if they went back off a chain back to belt drive, this is 26 mind, if they went back to belt drive, kept this rim, they could still have a belt drive motorbike. Sidecar lugs on here. They expected it possibly, and here there's 2 lugs with blanking plates. But having said that, that's sidecar lugs. And also another blanking screw there, that's the other sidecar lug. So we've got sidecar lug, 4-point fixing, 2 up there, 1 there and 1 down here. And then the back stand. One of the fitments of the day, which was period, nobody would have been seen as they are today with a wicker basket on the back of a 1926 motorbike. Wicker baskets are a fad of the 80s in England. What they would get is an old doctor's bag of this size or a bit bigger, but this is a nice sensible size. Carry your spanners, carry your to take your tyres off, your tyre levers, and carry a spare tube. And that would go onto the carrier and held down by straps, because as you can see, this is the standard toolbox. It covers the useful bits such as plug spanner, spares plug, what have you, but it don't cover the things if you're on a long journey. And you have to bear in mind, this is 1926, really rough roads, some roads not tarmac had them, and consequently you had to be able to sort out your own maintenance problems on the road. We start now with the handlebar layout for the average motorcyclist of the day. First of all, shock-proof rubber grips. I told you the tyres were high pressure. This is a shock-proof rubber grip. Now that did give a lot of protection against road shocks on bikes of this kind. So there's a shock-proof rubber grip. Now that is 70 odd years old now. Right, now if we look at the right hand lever, that's a front brake, internal expanding, just like modern motorbikes, internal expanding. Then we come to the air control and the throttle control. Start off with it nearly closed. When the engine is running, fully open. That leaves you then to be able to pull this throttle with your thumb. If you're with a sidecar mounted, you can pull it that way, but lots of people just hook their thumb in it. That's why it's pulled up. And they would hook their thumb into it and that would be it. So that's throttle and air, okay? Now we come to the magneto advanced and retired. Quite often when you kick these motorbikes over, they would give you a kick. You will pull them back so as you had there in there, and that would stop the engine giving you a nasty kick. So that's that. Now this is the steering damper. With a sidecar, quite often it was alright, but if you were riding it solo, always had it lightly pressed, so as it stopped the handlebars giving a good old shake. always having it slightly depressed, okay? And then it's our 2 clamps for the headlight. Now on a lot of bikes the headlight brackets would have went through the forks. On this model they don't. They're clipped to the handlebars, and then the nuts for the light are inside. So we take off the front, you can see the nuts for the inside. So that's carbide lighting, headlight. Nice 6-inch diameter headlight. Show up 1 telegraph pole. So that's 60 yards. If we come round onto the other side of the handlebars, valve lifter. Vitally important on a 550 engine. Oil was pretty thick in them days. So you brake it on high when it comes up to compression. Get it over on compression, let go of the valve lever, kick the bike over. And then once again on the left hand side we would have clutch control. So here's the clutch. By 1926 there was 2 kinds of lighting, and although this gentleman I would have thought was quite well off to buy a brand new motorbike, especially from a motorcycle show, the electric lighting set cost £7.50 in them days, and it was called a mag, and you had a dynamo on the top to generate the electric. As I say, £7.50, you don't come across many of them, but them people who had it, they were lucky. So we look at the lighting. It's called acetylene lighting because you use calcium carbide, drop water onto it, it makes acetylene, it comes through here, through from the generator, up through in a tube. There's the tube going underneath for the feed. Also it would travel all the way along here because there'd be a T-piece in the pipe putting some of the gas over to the back light, and eventually we would arrive at the back light. So you can always tell if it was going. Obviously if it's dark you can see it's going, but these things always got quite warm. One of the things was, being as it was water generating, if you run out of water at night, well, you could always stop and help it with a little bit of your own water if necessary. So that was what old time motorcyclists used to do. This tank holds 1 3/4 gallons of petrol. The bike will do about 50 to the gallon. So we got 1 3/4 gallons, so we say you got 75 miles. And that's on this side. That's where you put the petrol in. On the other side is another cap, and that's the oil side. Now that's vitally important on this particular bike. On other bikes you sometimes see an auxiliary pump. Well, here there's only 1 pump. We put the oil in there on that side, put the oil in, and we have a pump there. Now that pump, you give that a squirt every 5 to 7 miles, and initially you'll see quite a haze of smoke, but you have to remember to do it because there's no other form of oiling the main bearings or anything in this engine. You have to pump this, it goes into the top of the engine and gradually works its way down through oil ways in passages to the main bearing at the bottom. So that's the oil pump, vitally important. Once every 5 or 7 miles. Some speedometers that you had of the day would tell you when your 5 or 7 miles was up. In this case you'll just have to think, how far have I gone? Well, on the front of the motorbike, as I showed you from the other side, there's a magneto. Well, there's a chain drive from the bottom of the engine up to the front of the magneto with the cover over the top. That's a chain drive. That's how the magneto is rotated. So we have that chain drive there. And here you can see quite clearly underneath the cylinder head you can see the side valves. 2 side valves, one's the exhaust and one's the inlet. Now the inlet lets the petrol into the engine and the exhaust lets the gas out of the engine. So you have 2 valves, both side valves, and that's where they are. And then if we look coming towards the back of the engine is the Triumph carburetor. Unique in so much as it's got 2 bodies as against 1 body, and at the back of it it's got an air filter so as it don't take dirt and dust into the engine. In them days roads were very dirty and dusty. Some bikes didn't have nothing at all there and it took in a lot of dust. All that does is give you plenty of wear, and then you soon want your engine repaired. On the Triumph they added this carburetor. This is the dust shield, and it should only suck in clean air. And also just above the carburetor is the gear change mechanism. There we are, there's the gear change. It's got 3 speeds: pull back for 1, push down for 2 and 3. Here's the clutch operating arm. That every time you pull on that, there it is moving there. That frees the clutch so as you can change gear. So that's the clutch operating arm, and I've already told you about the 3-speed. You have to pull in the clutch lever to change your gear from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, or from 3 up to 2 and back to 1 if you're going up a steep hill. Next to it is the kickstart mechanism with a return spring. The return spring is there, so when you press down on the Kickstarter like that, it comes back. You hear it on the ratchet, it comes back. So there we are. We're on compression now. Now we're off of compression. There we go. Okay. So each time you press it down with your foot, you don't take your foot off, let your foot come back with the lever, and that's the way to do it. So we have 3-speed mechanism, that's a clutch mechanism, and that's a kickstarter for starting the engine. Now if we look farther back, we have an enclosed top chain guard, so as we don't catch our trousers in the chain. Some bikes at that time had a totally enclosed. Triumphs didn't. Quite cheaper to build one of these, and it is a complete enclosed chain guard. But Triumphs had this. That made sure if you had a pillion passenger or a further rider, he didn't get his clothes caught in the chain. Because in them days, lots of motorcyclists wore a coat. They didn't wear leggings and a coat like we do in modern times. They wore a big coat and it strapped up between their legs, and if you weren't careful, be caught in the chain and you would be thinking whatever's going on. Here we have the chain drive. As I said, on the other side is the original rim that they used to use for the belt drive, but having said that, they're moving away from belt drive now. We're on to chain drive. Here's the chain, and all that big rim does now, that's a brake. In the next year, 1926, they incorporated a brake drum like they got at the front wheel. Consequently, they could do away with that great big belt rim. That then was a step forward. 2 good expanding brakes. Then below it is the back stand. Now these bikes didn't normally have a side stand, they only had a back stand. If it was on a sidecar, you didn't even have to use the back stand. But if you were riding it solo, every time you got to where you were going, you had to pull it up, put it on the back stand. Roads weren't very good in them days, and it was difficult to make it secure. But there we are. That's a bike, 1926 Model QA.